Welcome to episode 99 of the Sports Geek podcast. This week we look into digital maturity in both the sports business or any other business for that matter.
Welcome to the Sports Geek podcast, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals.
And now, here's your host, who often falls down the rabbit hole of Facebook ad campaign stats, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. That's right, my name is Sean Callanan, and you're listening to the Sports Geek podcast. I did have to pause my fall down the rabbit hole. I do love jumping into the Facebook ads campaign, and especially the Power Editor. The changes that have been happening recently from a reporting point of view have been tremendous. I actually got a survey just this morning giving a bit of feedback around the Facebook Power Editor. If you're not using the Power Editor when you're doing your Facebook ads and you are using Boost Post, stop. Please stop. Don't use Boost Post at all. Power Editor is exactly what it describes. It is where the power is. And there's been a lot of updates recently, especially on the business manager side. So again, if you haven't set up your accounts, both from a pages point of view and an ad accounts point of view in Business Manager, then you're not getting all the latest and greatest that Facebook's pushing out in that ads product. Wow, didn't expect to do a bit of a spiel on ads there, but thanks, DJ Joel. I do fall down that rabbit hole. My name's Sean Callanan from Sports Geek. You can find me on all channels, Twitter, Snapchat, Facebook. Go to Sean Callanan Speaks on Facebook to find me on Facebook. And a new platform, which I will discuss after the interview. My special guest this week is Isabelle Perreault, who I met at SEAT in San Francisco. She presented one of the most interesting panel discussions on the first day, on the Monday, last session of the day, on the digital maturity, and she did a study, and there'll be links in the show notes. You can go to the show notes for this episode, as you can with every episode, sportsgeekhq.com/99, because I think it's really good to follow along with some of the findings from Isabelle's report. I'll talk a little bit more after the interview. So here's my interview with Isabelle Perreault on digital maturity. Very happy to welcome Isabelle Perreault from Stratford Managers. Met her at SEAT in San Francisco. Welcome to the Sports Geek podcast, Isabelle.
Thank you so much, Sean.
You did ask before we got started, were you the first Canadian on the podcast? And unfortunately, that title is held by John McCauley, formerly with the Toronto Maple Leafs. But very happy to have Canadian sports professional executives on the podcast.
Yes, I'm very happy to participate, and I know John, so that's great.
And so before we get stuck into the digital maturity assessment that you did at SEAT, I want to dive into a bit of your background. So before you were at Stratford Managers, you were at the Ottawa Senators. What was your role there?
Yes, I started at the Senators in a digital role. So I was leading the digital strategy there for about 2 years, and then I continued being head of digital, but I also took on the director of marketing. So they kind of was foreseeing the changes taking place where it was becoming more and more necessary to integrate the strategies, and I just took on both roles. So I was overseeing the marketing, the market research, the sales, but also all of the digital for Senator Sports and Entertainment for about, I think I was there for 8 years.
So
8 or 9 years. Yeah, it's wonderful, and they're still a good client of mine. So great organization.
So the good thing I loved about the session that you did at SEAT around the digital maturity assessment, we'll go into that and some of the findings of that, was it really illustrated, I guess, the transformation as an industry that we've seen the sports digital industry move through. Like just the story that you just told then, people working in digital, wherever the background they come from, whether it's a journalistic background or more of a comms background or more of a technology background, the digital departments have been formed in all these sports teams and then been either integrated into marketing, absorbed by marketing, and really become a dual function. So you lived through that with the Senators?
I did, and it's funny. I think that is there's no one common approach. I know we have that conversation at Seed, and I think I see that for my clients too now, where it's really based on the capabilities of the organization. I think for sports organizations, it does make sense that it gets more integrated within marketing because the customer and the fan experience is so key. But typically, there is still somebody that owns that vision, whether that's one person or whether that's a group. And we'll dive into the findings more, but that was certainly a key challenge for all of the SEAT participants was that enterprise vision that was, often not always owned by either a group or a person.
So you went and sent out prior to SEAT, you sent out a survey to the attendees of SEAT for this digital maturity assessment. Do you want to sort of take everyone through a bit of background of that and what it involved for the teams?
Sure. So I guess I'll just give you a bit of background on just digital, maturity. Often sometimes I can trip up, what is digital maturity. So it was really, it stemmed from seeing the changes in the industry in my own experience at Senator Sports Entertainment, where we really needed to assess, I guess, our starting point. I think everybody says they want to be more digital. I think that's a common term. Every business wants to be more of a digital business. They can see the changes happening in their industry. But leaders often have a really different understanding or can have a different understanding of what that means. So for some, it's really technology driven. It's all about whether it's cloud computing or driving operational efficiencies. And for others, especially in the sports world, it's very customer-centric, fan-centric, what's happening in the arena. And then for others, it's really about emerging digital tools like beacons. We talked a lot about at SEAT. So the first step is really to have a common understanding of what digital performance means for the organization. And so that's usually, that's where the digital maturity comes in. It's kind of like the starting point, understanding the strengths and the opportunities, the risks, but also assessing the current capabilities of an organization. So that's what the digital maturity assessment essentially is. It's an in-depth tool that we developed that can help in that process. So rather than, going through an extensive SWOT every time, we built this tool that assesses 5 key dimensions that are proving to drive digital performance. So, overall strategy, the customer and the fan experience, technology and data, which is the foundational dimension of digital maturity, and then operational processes and people and culture. And so it takes them through an in-depth assessment of those 5 dimensions and essentially just rates their readiness and outcomes, a bit of a easy to consume scorecard on their digital readiness.
And so the idea is that you're surveying different parts of the organisations, because the phrase digital maturity, you're right. If you were to ask what is it in the digital track at SEAT, and then what is it in the CRM track, and then what is it in the in the CIO IT track, there's every potential that you get a different answer for each one.
Oh, absolutely. So typically you would get, ideally you would get the executive team as a whole to take the maturity assessment. But for SEAT, just, for pure, I guess,
resourcing.
Execution, right, exactly. Ease of execution. The point person that was going to SEAT took the survey. Sometimes there were 2 or 3, and sometimes there were only 1. But however, the benefit of it is that the questions are fairly in-depth, it allows them to just pick, where they're easy statements to pick where they believe the organization is at. So there certainly could be some bias, whether they're an IT person or whether they're a digital person, but the depth of the survey itself can certainly gives a good view of their own challenges. So I think for the people... Yep. Yeah, and I think for those going to SEAT, the fact that they were, participating in the conference specifically tied to technology and, technology and performance and that kind of holistic vision, I think they're probably approaching it with a pretty unbiased approach.
So we don't have to dive completely into all the stats, because the link to the slides that you presented at SEAT are going to be in the show notes, and they're available on SlideShare. That'll be linked there. But do you want to dive into some of the findings of I guess, the SEAT community, and I guess then we can sort of talk about some of the discussion points that we had in the session?
Sure. So the top, maybe we'll talk about the top challenges.
Yeah, that's the one I was going to go to, the top challenges, because I think there'll be a lot of nodding heads when you go through the top challenges for those who are listening to the podcast.
Yeah. So I asked more qualitatively just they had to assess their top, what were their top challenges, and then it was supported by the data in the assessment as well, that a lack of enterprise vision and executive buy-in was by far the top challenge. So by that, it's like I was saying before, it's really that common understanding of what digital performance means for the organization. When you don't have that, the results, and which came out in the discussions we were having and one-on-one conversations I was having with folks, was that it often results in piecemeal initiatives. I like to call it the popcorn effect, where projects are popping up all over the place in various areas of the business that aren't necessarily interconnected or complementary. So they might have their own goals and KPIs in advancing their department's own needs, but it can lead to missed opportunities and sluggish performance or duplication of effort if it's not seen within a more holistic view of where the organization needs to go.
Yeah, which
I think that's
I completely agree. I mean, I think getting executives to understand, I guess, the why of digital, and the why, both of the expense side of it and the resourcing, which is another one of the challenges, appropriate funding and resources to be able to do it. But then, that popcorn effect, these projects popping up in different departments, highlights the second challenge, which was a really big theme of SEAT of collaboration. The thing that where digital works is when people are working together across departments. And so if you have an IT department that's leading the way and a digital department or a data team that's a laggard, it's very hard to get success if they're not all in step.
Yeah, and I think collaboration was a clear second one, and it's absolutely interconnected to that vision, of course, right? If you don't have that vision, it's hard to collaborate on the prioritization of those initiatives. So I think one of the key focuses as well of digital maturity is that organizations that have a higher maturity are picking one or two focus areas, and they're making big strides versus making small steps in multiple directions, because they are creating that roadmap. They're creating that 2 to 3 year vision of where the organization needs to be across all aspects, right? So not just the fan experience, not just the technology infrastructure, data. They're putting all of that into one common roadmap and with a 2 to 3 year focus, and then it really becomes about aligning all of the resources and the budget to meet those goals. So collaboration thus, just kind of follows suit, because you obviously have to collaborate on that roadmap.
Yes, and I think you're right. There are a lot of teams that are taking that focus of very much that stadium experience, and really making that a key focus. Obviously, because the technology has now risen to a level where it's more affordable and more accessible, but they're the fans that are right in front of them. So that seems to be a focus of a lot of teams where the collaboration is starting to kick in.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think sometimes it's whatever's closest, right? So sometimes you see where whatever's having the biggest impact. So typically it is around that fan experience, because that is critical, right? It's mission critical to any sports and entertainment, the experience in arena. However, you still need those foundational requirements. Like one of the another key finding of the assessment was data, right? Data, everything comes back to your data infrastructure. So you could have a great experience, but to then capitalize on that fan, and I hate to see it, to say it so brutally, but really it is about, when the fan has a good experience, you want to make sure that you're able to capitalize on that, get them to come back, and you want to access their data and know more about them and personalize the experience. Well, all of that begins with a good foundation of data and a data infrastructure that's integrated across the organization. So again, not piecemeal, where there's data buckets throughout the organization. So you can start with that, although, there's certain projects that could happen to improve that experience. Absolutely. It has to be done with the realization of those bigger foundational investments. That's one of the big initiatives at Senator Sports and Entertainment, actually, where they realized that the data and analytics strategy was going to be key to everything else, to the entire roadmap. And so they've really put a huge emphasis on that in the coming year or two.
And you've got that in the back end of the report in some of the game changers, saying that getting the data and the analytics right is what you absolutely need if you're going to start understanding the customer journey and what they want and what they want out of the experience that they get consuming your team, whether it be in stadium or online. It's getting that data and analytics platform right.
Yes, and it's not an easy task, I'm sure you probably know with your own clients as well. It can be a pretty, and I lived it too with the Senators. It's a big project which is true collaboration, because it's not just the technology back end. It's also the skills required to, it's one thing to have all that data, and it's another thing to actually know what to do with it. It can be quite overwhelming. So yeah, it's an absolute, that's a big one. It's a big foundational investment of most organizations that are high in the maturity scale.
One phrase that I did love in your presentation, I think it did come out in the discussion, was about building, and investing in the digital skill sets. And the phrase "digital is the new normal." I love that, because it has to be normal amongst your organisation, but you have to train up your organisation to use all these platforms and techniques and processes that digital offer, that did not exist, in some cases as little as 2 years, as little as 12 months ago. You've really got to invest in your people and your culture to make digital just a thing that happens. It is part of your business.
Yeah, I think that's critical. And I forget who said it, and I've been using it. Because it was so insightful. Someone said that it's not, we're not building digital strategies. We're building strategies for a digital world. And I always use that with clients too, because I think it's a very important switch, like a mindset switch, where, I really, I get some pushback on this, but every business is a digital business. And the people in the culture aspect is often one that is not thought of. There's a lot of change management involved in making this happen, especially. So there's two findings that were really interesting. One wasn't surprising, was that 74% of all the participants said that innovation was encouraged within the organization and new ideas were welcomed. But only 18% said that a test and learn mentality or a fail fast mentality was an accepted mode of operating. So that's a really interesting dichotomy, because I've lived that life. I know where, especially in the sports and entertainment world, there's a new thing almost every 2 to 3 months. There's something else coming at you, and innovation is certainly encouraged. We want to, the fans need to be entertained. You want to try new things. But with that comes also an acceptance that has to come from the top that it's okay to fail. It's okay to test and learn. There has to be a calculated risk, obviously. But when you do have that collaboration and that vision in place, there's got to be that understanding that there's going to be some failures along the way. to try new things.
Yeah, I think I might have said this in the session. It sort of flies in the face of sports. Win at all costs. We're all in it to win. And, I can't see, we were lucky enough to go to Facebook after SEAT and seeing posters around, fail fast, fail often, as a mantra, for innovation, because you can't, it's really a really big thing in innovation. But I can't see those kind of posters being hung up in sports organisations, even if they are just in the digital department, because, a coaching staff seeing something that says fail fast often, it sort of goes completely against everything that the philosophies of great coaches push out every single day. But I completely agree on that whole innovation aspect. It's one thing to say it, it's another thing to live it and breathe it.
Mm. And the majority of the respondents also said that they had, for the most part, junior staff assigned to digital channels still. And that there wasn't any proactive plan on training education tied to their vision, tied to that roadmap, which again just shows that bit of lag on the people and culture side, where I think maybe that, I don't know if that knee-jerk reaction, but we tend to say, we got to get the younger folks in to help us with the strategy. But we're saying, we're seeing that that was okay when digital was mostly tied to marketing, tactical channels. But now that digital has become a significant driver for the bottom line in terms of cost savings and revenue uplift, it's really important to get those senior resources in with those skills.
Definitely, and I guess that goes back to that challenge of time, both resources and funding for those spots, because the easiest thing is to bring in younger people in to fill out the team and to be in those execution roles, but from a front-facing point of view, they're reaching hundreds of thousands, in some cases millions of fans in some of the interactions they're doing. So, yeah, you're right. The funnel, the skill set funnel, effectively needs to be flipped a little bit and make sure there is more senior positions in that space, because that role is getting more and more important.
Yeah, exactly, and that's not unique to the sports and entertainment industry by any means.
No,
similar with all industries.
No, it isn't. It is something that is across the board. I love that. I love that phrase that you have. Effectively, people who listen to this podcast know I use the hashtag Steal with Pride, and I'm actually going to steal that. Building strategies for we're not building digital strategy. We're building strategies for a digital world. I love that phrase as well. I think that's going to go part of my toolkit as well for future presentations. Yeah. Isabel, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. Where can people find you and also find out more information about the digital maturity assessment?
They can go to stratfordmanagers.com would be the best place. They can usually find me on LinkedIn, Isabel Perrault, for my Francophone audience. and
I'll put links to Isabel's LinkedIn, and I'll also have the slide share in the show notes so you can check it out. It was like I said, it was one of the most deep dive, interesting discussions, because there was a lot of nodding heads in the room, and I think there was a lot of people, feeling like they were in the same space and I guess sharing the same problems and having the same frustrations, but starting to see that there are definitely ways for their whole organisation to become more digitally mature.
Absolutely. Yep, about collaboration and that vision. So, and we are happy to help.
All right. Thank you very much, Isabel, and hopefully we will see you again in SEAT in Las Vegas next year.
Absolutely, and congratulations to the whole SEAT team. It was a real first-class event. So impressive to see the caliber of the folks there. Really well done. Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Sean.
Sign up for Sports Geek News at sportsgeekhq.com/sign up now.
Thanks again to Isabel. As I said earlier, the links to the slideshow and all the findings from the report from SEAT is available on SlideShare. And if you wouldn't have noticed recently, SlideShare is rebranded. It's under the LinkedIn banner. It's now SlideShare on LinkedIn. that slideshow will be in the show notes. But I really, the episode question for this episode is, where do you think your team, your organisation is in terms of digital maturity? Are you still having those discussions with your CEO around what digital can offer and those kind of things? It's a very common issue, and it's a very common theme with multiple organisations at SEAT. And it's not just, again, as Isabel said, it's not just a sports business issue. It is something that is happening across the spectrum of many businesses. One thing I want to do, I did promise to talk about a new platform. I gave it a bit of a trial recently. That's Blab. As it is, and you would think it's spelled as it is, blab.im. It's a new, I guess it's a video chatting platform. It's sort of like Google Hangouts, and I was giving it a bit of a play in that you can have it chat with multiple people can tune in. You can embed it on your site. Just having a play with it at the minute. I might jump on every now and again and take some questions on the Blab channel. So if you go to blab.im and then look for Sean Callanan, you connect via your Twitter account. Don't know where it's going to go. I guess my advice, as it is with every single platform that's out there, go and secure your handle. Can't hurt. You never know how you might use it. It might be a really good place to do a quick fan Q&A. It definitely seems a bit simpler and easier to use than Google Hangout, which was a good product. It was just clunky as hell. So it might be available. It might be useful down the track. It might be something that potentially athletes get involved in and use that as a bit of a fan Q&A type of setup. Again, really easy. Hit the button, hit record. You can use it either on your phone or via the desktop. So I'd say, my advice always when these new platforms come out, go in, secure your handles, send me a tweet, let me know that you've secured your handle. Whether you're not doing anything, then if you're going to do something, give it a shot. Send out a tweet, maybe answer some questions, maybe get a few players on board. I'm going to I'm going to give it a bit of a trial over the next couple of weeks to try to figure out the mechanics of it and give you a bit more of a proper review down the track. But I'd love to hear, send in a tweet if you're playing on Blab already, or if you think it's just one more thing that you don't want to have to worry about. So if it's in that case, just secure your name and worry about it. Worry about it later. You don't have to be on every single platform. One last call to action. This is episode 99, and what I've realised is I'm starting to run out of sounds of the game clips. So please go to a game. Next time you're at a game and you're snapping some video, or the crowd roars, please send me that clip, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com. If you want to profile how loud and ferocious your fans are, send it in. I'd love to profile it at the end of the episode, and I'm sure James doesn't mind putting it at the end of the episode to really, that's what sport's about, that raw emotion. So I want to make sure I keep up sounds of the game. Until next week, until next episode, which will be episode 100. Very grateful to reach that. If you can leave an iTunes review, that would be absolutely awesome. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/iTunes. It should drive you into the iTunes app. It should be pretty easy to leave a review. 2 or 3 minutes, left a review. I'd very much appreciate it. Until then, my name's Sean Callanan. You've been listening to the Sports Geek Podcast.
Like the Sports Geek Podcast? Find us on facebook.com/sportsgeek. Check out which teams work with Sports Geek at sportsgeekhq.com/clients. Please leave a review on iTunes. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/iTunes. Thanks for listening to the Sports Geek Podcast.